Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by SurveyMonkey. Go to try.surveymonkey.com/twist and sign up for a free trial. And MailChimp. Manage lists with up to 2,000 subscribers and send 12,000 emails per month for free with MailChimp.
Charlie Rose or something like that. Hey everybody, today we have a very special program. I've been waiting to have Warren Bennis on the program for a year almost. He is the foremost thought leader on leadership. And leadership is what you need to build a successful startup. And this is going to be one of the most important hours you're ever going to spend listening to the program. So please stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
I don't remember, but it was, you know.
What was the most memorable moment for you being a soldier? Combat or not?
In combat, you mean about?
Well, in combat would be.
Or a leader in general, leadership.
Leadership in general, and but just specifically.
But being scared shitless. When the night I was being driven to the front lines in it wasn't a 2.5-ton truck, but it was a regimental vehicle that drove me from division headquarters to regimental headquarters to battalion headquarters, and joining my platoon the first night, and I was scared out of my mind. You can imagine. I was November 1944, I was 19. Is that right? I think that's right. Yeah.
19 years old.
1944, and it was just after the breakthrough, but it was not clear yet, over across the Rhine. And I was in the 63rd Division.
The Rhine in...
the Rhine River in Germany.
Yeah, in Germany.
And we had just crossed that. And that night, I was met by the messenger. We had messengers then, and he picked me up from a company headquarters, took me to my platoon, where my platoon sergeant was sleeping in a bombed-out kitchenette. He was on one side, the messenger was on the other side. The messenger said, "Take my place." It was a banquette on both sides of this kitchen with no roof, and it was
roof had been blown out.
It was in very right across from almost at the Ulm River. So we're in southern. It was the Third Army. It was the 7th Army, which was in the south. And that night, the messenger said, "Take my sleep there." I said, "Oh, I'm going to." I did have a sleeping bag, which I threw away the next day because I didn't need it anymore. And I slept on the floor, and I was awake all night. And when my first sergeant woke up in the morning in the banquet, "Who's on the floor?" he asked the messenger. I insisted he stay where he was sleeping.
Yeah.
And he said, "That's our new lieutenant." And I was waiting, what is the first sergeant going to say? Oh, another one of these 90-day wonders? And he said, "Good." He said, "We can use him." Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
That isn't the worst moment, but it was the most poignant moment. I mean, really, even talking about it now, Sergeant Bridges, who was a little bit older than I, had 3 years of college. I had none. Says, "Good, we can use him."
Yeah.
And these guys taught me how to be a leader.
Right.
Isn't that? So what Bridges said to me, very smart guy. The messenger Gunnar was killed later on. That's somewhere in the book, I think. Gunnar. I visited his parents after the war in Syracuse, New York. So Bridges said, "Look, I suggest, Lieutenant," he said, really very, very clear about calling me Lieutenant. And he said, "I suggest you follow Captain Bessinger. He's the company commander for a few days, just to get used to it, you know."
Yeah.
And I did. He was like I was like an intern.
Right.
But I was smart enough, I think, to take it in. I think that was a very big moment to realize that to learn to listen and to observe and to. Bridges was a model for me. He took me on as his lieutenant, and directly he's my subordinate. But he treated me with great respect.
Even though he was older, even though he had more experience.
Yeah.
And he could have just dismissed you as, hey,
I was just thinking about
what an inexperienced guy coming in here.
Yeah, because
But you slept on the floor, and you could have pulled rank.
That was a good. That was part of me, really.
So you showed a little humility, and you were just one of the guys, like you said before, is so important.
And what I didn't realize till after the war is.
Did you do that intentionally? To show, like, hey, I'm going to sleep on the floor. I'm one of the guys.
It was totally
serendipitous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
accidental.
Not conscious altogether, but I think there was a degree of awareness, not to take someone else's bed.
Right.
I think that was part of me.
Right.
But my spec number my title was replacement officer, and I never thought about that word until after the war. Replacement officer.
Right.
And at 1542, that was the number for replacement officer. And I looked at it, I didn't allow it to have any meaning. Who am I replacing? Well, I knew a little bit vaguely about the supposed time of you're in battle,
right.
Which was for the average infantry platoon leader, which I was, second lieutenant. It was between roughly the time before you were being injured or killed was about 6 weeks. I knew that going in.
Wow. At 19, you knew you're going in and you could be injured or dead in 6 weeks.
I signed up for Officer Candidate School, but not just Officer Candidate School, it was the Infantry Officer Candidate School, Fort Benning, Georgia.
Right.
I can't explain that, Jason.
Right.
I cannot explain that because did not consider myself brave or courage.
Right.
Honestly, I'm not joking. It was that why I wanted so bad to make something of myself.
Right.
I have the fantasy that at that time, if I had a mafioso, a mob leader come over and say, "We'd like to make you, Bennis, you enjoy to join them," I think I would have joined. Now, I don't think I would have, but I thought about that. I wanted so much to succeed.
You wanted to succeed.
I
Something
wanted to
inside
be an
of
officer.
You.
I wanted. That was a symbol of making.
Yeah.
I'm not. By the way, I'm not advocating this to anyone viewing this.
But you had a desire to make it.
A big, big desire. It wasn't totally foolish. It was a way of not being any longer an enlisted man, not being any longer a member, a troop.
Right.
But a guy with. I needed that.
Right.
External symbol.
You wanted to be a leader.
Yeah.
But then you got faced with the reality of being a leader.
And then I realized, this is the other point I made.
Did you regret it when you got in there and you said, wow, I'm going to be dead in 6 weeks possibly, and people are dying around me?
You know, there's something else that happens though, Jason. And I wrote about it. See, you printed out some stuff for me for me to read.
I like you telling the story without reading it.
But what's so interesting is that, you know something, role, the idea of role. Now, in theoretically speaking, as an organizational theorist, role means expectations of others. We have certain expectations of a lieutenant that are different from the colonel even. People laugh at when I'm with the president at USC, people laugh at his jokes all the time. I can tell the same joke, I won't always get the same laughs. There's something about power and role and robes and ceremony that really give you, forget about the others' expectations, you then have responsibility.
Expectation of yourself.
And you better live, and the beauty of the idea of role, if you take it seriously, is that you grow up. And it was as if that those roles drew from me, and I wrote a little bit about, the roles drew from me some selves, some possible selves I never knew were there and would never have known. I mean,
So when you put on that crown, when you put on that shoulder lapel, whatever it is.
Uneasy is the head that wears the crown, which is what's happening in the world today.
Right.
Well,
when you take that position, it will elevate your performance.
Yes.
It'll make you into that.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think people realize, it sounds so simple, not simple, but so what you just said.
Hello, everybody. It's Jason Calacanis, the host of This Week in Startups. One of the great things about having this program is that I get to pick the sponsors, and we only pick the sponsors based upon the products and services that myself or Tyler Crowley, my partner here, use. And one of those products that I use all the time is MailChimp. That's how I send my email newsletter. As you guys know, 2 years ago, I quit blogging, started doing email, and that list grew to over 20,000 members. I needed a way to manage that massive list. I couldn't use this desktop software. I needed software as a service. I got MailChimp. And one of the best features of MailChimp, I have it here on my screen that I'll show you, is I can segment my list. So here's my list. I'm clicking the segment button, and here I get
that interface.
It's just a beautiful interface.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous interface. And I can say, hey, show me all the people who have been added to the list after a specific date. So here I go. I say, hey, I want just the people who have signed up this month. And now I could segment and say, hey, just show me who signed up this month. Hey, here's the 81 people. Now I've got all the 81 people here. I hope, well, I can't show all their emails, but I can just click the send to button right here. And when I click that send to button, now I'm just sending to those 81 people. This is called segmenting your list, which is a great thing to do. And you can segment it by location or any information that you collect from users or some information you don't collect. One interesting thing you could do is, and here's a list of all the different ways you can segment. By first name, by last name. I can email all the Tylers on the list, by what company they're at, their job function, what they're interested in, because I ask people what they're interested in. So I could say, hey, if you're only interested in venture capital, I'm only going to email you about that, gender, location. But hey, look at that, Cloud Score. Remember we had Joe Marchese from Cloud Score, and I could say, give me people who have a Cloud Score that is great.
Fernandez, I think you mean?
What's that?
Joe Fernandez?
Who did I say?
Marchese?
Oh, Joe Marchese is another entrepreneur. God, I'm sorry. I'm tired sometimes. It's Joe.
You just came back from New York just for this, huh?
Is it back here? Yeah. So anyway, the Cloud Score is greater than 20. Boom. Show me the people who are, oh, that's 500 people. That's too much. Let me just make it 30 here. So show me the people who have Cloud Scores over 30. Boom. Here's the 360 people. I can just start emailing to just them. So I could, if I wanted to give a free ticket, I can go all the way up the list. I can say, hey, over 40, over 50, over 70. Who are the really powerful people here on the list? And boy, hey, got the right people on the list. I don't want to show their emails. But an incredibly powerful tool. Go check it out. The free plan is always free. And this is one of the nice things. They give, if you have a small list, like only 2,000 people or less, and you do under 12,000 emails a month, they do it free. And they just charge you as you go. You get these sort of MailChimp points. And it's just an amazing product. So thank you to them for being a partner on the program, and thank you for your attention to the sponsors. Without them, independent media like this trip to New York, where we shot a bunch of great episodes, would not be possible, or the trips to San Francisco or to London. It costs a lot of money to produce high-quality content like this in HD and do it on a consistent basis. And without partners like MailChimp, we couldn't do it. Thank you, MailChimp. MailChimp.
You got to go back to the...
As I think has profound, I mean, our conversation, let's say it, because it is a see, this is what's important right now. Right. And one of the aspects of really terrific leaders is they know how to manage conversations. That's your business.
Right.
My business? Your business is that. I mean, you get paid for making people interesting.
Yeah.
See, my definition of boredom is when I can't, it's really a conceit. My definition of boredom is when I can't make a person interesting. I really have that conceit. I can make anyone interesting. Even this guy over here on my right who doesn't say a damn thing.
He's pretty interesting.
He looks implacable, inscrutable. I can make him up. And I've had bets with my daughter.
Right.
And she knows of someone very boring at a party. She said, Dad,
make this guy interesting.
Here's $2. Make him interesting.
Right.
And
it's got to be something
I go over there and I go.
Yeah. There's got to be something in there. Huh.
Isn't that your job, really, to make people interesting? Because you go.
My job.
All you know about me is I'm an author of a lot of books, right?
Yeah.
I could be dull as hell and write 31 books.
No, I know you're not, because I've listened to some of the audiobooks.
Okay.
I know that you have very interesting things to say about the subject, and I know that anybody who's thought about it for that long, it's got to be something in there, right?
You could impart to others, yeah.
Right, it's got to be something there.
Yeah. You already have the expectation. This is a guy written all those books, so he's an authority.
Right.
So that's.
But the interesting thing is, you're saying, hey, this is amorphous. Leadership is an evolving thing. It's not one thing. It's many things.
Oh my God, yes. Even what you see, I do think managing conversations, knowing when to shut up and listen, not just do parallel listening, is when someone else is talking, you're thinking about what you're going to say next. Yeah. That's another thing.
Deep listening
is so powerful.
That was what Clinton was good at. I mean, that was his superpower as a leader.
Let's look at some other examples of that. When Gandhi returned from South Africa back to India, he got a law degree. I mean, he wasn't the top class, but he got a law degree from England. And the first, he spent his entire, he was no kid, he was 46 in 1915. When he gets off the boat from South Africa to land probably at what is now called Bombay, he spent the entire year, village to village, listening to what was hurting people, listening to what was on their minds. There was no radio, there was no TV. Even when I was in India 2 years helping create a business school in Calcutta. And even then, there were people just then had not heard that Kennedy had been killed. And that happened like 9 months before. They still hadn't gotten in the village. He walked from village to village in 1915 for a full year. He was 46 years of age. He was no kid.
Right.
And to hear what was on people's minds and hearts. Or I think you're right. I think Obama did do that. Listen very carefully, although he must is a community organizer in Chicago.
Right.
I think listening. This is also what Falstaff was telling. If you want to lead people, you better, you know, and gotta live in their world a bit, you know.
Yeah.
And it means really listening, not just fake. You know, you can, I guess, maybe for fake being authentic. I don't know. It's sort of a paradox. Fake.
Yeah. Fake authenticity. Faux authenticity.
Yeah, like that. Can you? Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Goya once said something like that. That the only thing you can fake in Hollywood is, he didn't use the word authenticity, but is being honest. So, can you fake honesty? Well, I don't know, because I know when I went to the vaudeville with my parents, my dad would say, "God, he's such a natural." What does that mean? It means even on this program, I don't think if my 3 kids look at me in this program, they'll recognize me as their dad, and they'll know I'm being interviewed, and they'll know I'm being, I'm being on. But I think they'll also know I'm being as truthful as to the extent that I know myself.
Right.
And of course, there are things. That's where the rub is.
Right.
People who don't understand the effects they're having on other people.
Right. And leaders can do that unintentionally. They could not listen deeply enough at a time and make the person think they don't care.
Right.
They could be distracted by their BlackBerry,
that's the
and
tragedy.
they could crush somebody.
That's a tragedy. You asked earlier a question when to get back to flaws. Well, I want to give you a real-life example and use real names. Larry Summers, one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, had the fortune or misfortune of being the nephew of 2 Nobel winners in economics. Paul Samuelson was one who was one of my teachers at MIT, and a guy named Kenneth Arrow, who was at Stanford. These are 2 uncles of Larry Summers. Yeah. Larry Summers was the youngest full professor given tenure at Harvard. He was 28, really a superstar, always the brightest guy in the class. Right. And he was total failure as president. Got kicked out, really, faculty uprising, and he's really is brilliant.
Smartest guy in the room.
He is the smartest guy in the room. Been all that way all of his life.
But
what he didn't read, what he wasn't intelligent about, was not realizing the effects. And he didn't. He wasn't. He's really a good. I think he's a good guy.
Right.
But he would come through like this. He's teaching. He's giving his first lecture at the Harvard Business School. This is a true story. He's the new president is visiting one of the strong colleges, very famous Harvard Business School. So, its basis, one of its core values, Jason, is the case study. So the first thing that he does is confront them about their religion almost.
Yeah.
Now they're not only.
Let's talk about the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, like that.
We could shred these.
Yeah. So he said, why are you still doing case studies?
Yeah.
Now they're not all doing case. The first one is an exaggeration. They've been moving more and more away from case studies.
Right.
But it looks at them. How could he be that? First of all, he doesn't really understand it.
Right.
He's confronting a group for the first time without any understanding of whom he's talking with.
Right. He came in guns blazing.
And he's done that in college. You may have heard of a guy named, he's a well-known psychologist, and he teaches at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. His name is Howard Gardner. He really exploded on the scene a long time ago. He's very young still, with a book on multiple intelligence.
Of course, yeah.
That's the guy.
Emotional intelligence.
And he was so, and Howard's a very good friend. And and I said, Howard, cool out about Larry, but Howard was among others who saw this guy as really, you know what he was doing? He was invalidating people. And you don't lead through invalidation, do you?
No.
I mean, and he would just make and he wasn't aware of it.
Wow. I mean, that's the thing. Being smart and being a good leader, these are not like perfect correlations.
No,
a lot of the smartest people I've met are just not good
yes.
at being leaders.
Well, Summers, I hate to pick on him because I don't think he's a nasty man at all.
Right.
I don't think he intends to be that way. That's
Right.
the tragedy of it.
Right. He's going to look at something, see the flaws, and then immediately talk about them before saying, how was your day?
Yeah.
What makes you get out of bed in the morning? Hey, how can I help the school?
And, yeah, if people got to know him, but what he didn't realize is, as a leader of a large institution, any large institution, here's the difficulty too. How do you get known? How does Howard Schultz, who has now, I don't know, 17, God knows how many Starbucks stores,
yeah.
but I remember I got to know Howard. Is that the number? How do you know that?
For different reasons than you.
Shareholder and goes to 3 times a day.
Okay. So
Biggest
anyway,
fan.
so Howard and I became friends, and I've never had a formal. We just became buddies, and I remember sometime in the mid-'90s, he said, "My goal," he said, "is to have 2,000 shops by the year 2000." And I asked an innocent question: "Why? Why do you need to go to 2,000?" And you know something? There's no economic law, and my doctorate was in economics. There's no economic law that says stop.
Right.
There's no. At this point, stop growing.
Right. Right. Enough's enough.
But I asked him that question. He said, he paused a bit, and he said, "Well, because if I don't, I'll be cannibalized by others who will grow." Well, that's not bad.
Fear.
Yeah.
Fear is a healthy part about being a leader.
Eaten alive. I mean, it could be that Pete's my, who knows?
Yeah.
And Pete's got to be worried about that. Before I come think about that, just because I'm going to have coffee.
The leaders you've met, they do have a certain, at least for me, paranoia and fear about them. Like they constantly think, while they are optimistic, while they think they're going to win, there's this other side to the personality where they're saying, but it could go away at any time.
Yes.
We could get blindsided, and we need to be prepared for that. At least the good ones I've met.
And if you don't have, there ought to be this is the first time you'll hear it from me
Right.
at this moment. I think every organization at the very top ought to have another C position called CWO. And what that is Chief Worrier Officer. Because people, get the paradox, most leaders have a positive outlook.
Right.
Or else they wouldn't be there.
And nobody brings them bad news because they know they're positive.
Exactly.
And I don't want to be the guy who brings bad
So
news
you
to
got
the
to
leader.
have someone who's going to be a chief worrier.
I got one of
Worrier,
those.
not warrior, but worrier.
I got one of those. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, he's always, well, what if this goes away? What if we got to come back? And I think it's actually...
Don't you feel like shutting them down sometimes when they
Well,
do
I
that?
did have to, at one point I did say to him, I'm like, is it really that bad? And he was like, no, I just think I serve that purpose for you. So I think he realized he was self-aware enough to say, I have to warn you about what the downside are because you are so blind to downsides. Because I am. I'm just like, oh, well, it's going to work.
Yeah.
How do you know it's going to work? Well, I don't know. Everything else worked itself out of my life, so this should.
I haven't had exactly a successful career. I never got the hang of it until about 20 years ago about marriage,
Oh, please tell me.
No, I don't want
Taking
to.
notes.
No, not so much. But
if you can write the
wife,
book on how to solve marriage, then you're going to have a bestseller.
Say that again. How to be.
Just how to be a great husband. How to succeed at marriage. That's the bestseller.
Well, maybe starting with. Yeah, I've had some experience in that as a serial monogamist.
Yeah.
But my wife of 20 years is a retired physician, and she is a marvelous counterpoise for being much less spontaneous, much less impulsive than I can be.
Right.
But that's what also makes me a good conversationalist. Like, I didn't really want to see the questions.
Yeah.
Before I actually looked
Yeah.
at, but I didn't even think I put them in my. I think.
Yeah. No, it ruins it.
Caroline had them printed out for me. So, but Grace, my wife, a retired physician, who, by the way, we were going to get married in 1961, and I bolted. Yeah.
You came back around?
That's a whole other program after I
we'll
write
do
the
that in
book,
episode 2.
How to Have a Successful Marriage.
Yeah.
That'll come. I don't intend to write that yet.
Yeah.
But she is marvelous at curbing my enthusiasm, at curbing, and for any important decision.
Right.
In fact, I kiddingly refer to her as the abominable no woman.
Yeah. She'll put the brakes on.
She does. And I don't want to overdo it. I'm making this extreme. I don't mean to.
Yeah. No, it's constantly a balance. So I almost feel like I need to ask you again about leadership. The basic question: if people want to be a great leader, What do they need to remember? I mean, we talked about so many
You
things.
just answered your own question. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Please
but
do.
My index of good friendships and good conversations are MTBI, mean time between interruptions. I like this.
Right.
Actually, I interrupted you. Start that question again, because I interrupted it.
What is,
Get down to basics.
again,
Some deliverables.
starting, if you're trying to be a good leader, you know, and we talked about it for an hour, and
Yeah.
there's so much to it. What are the things we have to keep in mind? What are the things we need to do? We have to listen, you know, we got to be positive. What are the things, you know, at the end of the day?
Every question has a premise, and your question does. You got to really want to a lot.
You have to
You
want
gotta
to be a leader.
Want, yes, a lot.
A lot.
Because
Not just want it. You have to seriously want it. You want to put
yes.
that crown on. You want to
Yes.
put the lapels on.
You really want it.
Why? Why? Why do you have to really want it?
Because the sacrifices involved, the struggles involved, the conflicts involved, the learning something that learning to have a thick, to have a callus over your skin so you can live and work through difficulties. I think, let's take a look at any university president, which I did for a number of years. I'm looking at our new president, relatively new. He's in the middle of his second year, Max Nikias. He's terrific. Greek Cypriot. Came over and made something of himself, and his life. He has 11 holiday parties. Carefully not call them Christmas parties because that would not be politically correct. 11 at his home. Okay, that's in the month of December, starting December 3rd. Had to cancel the one before that because of the big windstorms.
Yeah.
So there are 11 of them. Okay, his day, and he is, say, I don't even quite know how old Max is. I'd say he's 60. He's probably plus, yeah, he's not over 60. He's probably about 58, 59.
Yeah.
And the energy that takes. Just look at every football home game, and not home game, but away games.
Right.
Where he has to meet with alumni. Think of just the schedule itself, Jason.
Right.
And if you don't want it, boy.
Yeah.
So that may be the first real question that I would say to aspiring leaders: do you really want it?
Yeah.
You got to.
Because it's going to be a lot of work.
That sounds
and
easy.
And a lot of hard conversations. I mean, it seems to me, you know, being a leader, and I've done it for 20 years starting companies, it's like your job every day is to have the hard conversations.
Yeah.
It's a hard, painful conversations every week, week in and week out. What is the problem we have to solve? What is the struggle that you're personally having?
And what else do you have? You are carrying a thing called responsibility. They're not epileptic.
Boy, do I know it. Boy, do I know
Every day you have to plan. It's like, you know, my wife has to plan a meal. Well, you have to plan every day. You are responsible for the payrolls. You are responsible for the consequences.
The careers, the investors.
And then, so if you don't love it and you get some kick out of it, man, you're not going to make it.
It's going to exhaust you.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to be exhausting.
And there are too many people I've known who've been hospitalized or they have to take sick leave because they just couldn't take it. And they weren't.
The nervous breakdown. The people have a heart attack, God forbid.
That's what it is.
It's just too much weight.
Yeah.
Heavy as the head. Heavy as the head.
Yeah,
Huh?
I mean,
is it worth it? Is it worth being a leader?
That's what you got to ask.
It's not a yes or no question. You
See,
can't just tell us. Can we all just quit and be followers?
One of the first questions we ask our students in the course we teach is called the art and adventure of leadership. Not the art and science, thank God.
Right.
It's the art and adventure of leadership.
Right.
And the first question we ask them in class is, do you really want to be leaders and why? We also ask them to name a person that they would like to emulate. That's on a little 3x5 card. And if you don't have that engine of just desire, for whatever reason, you know, it can be nasty too. It could be.
Yeah, I want to accumulate power.
And here's where I want to leave the viewers with a real paradox. One of my teachers at MIT was a man named Howard Schultz. I can see by your face the name doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah.
He probably held more cabinet posts than any living person. He's about 3 or 4 years older than I am. He was my teacher. Taught labor economics at MIT when I was a student.
I've heard the name.
Yeah, and he was Secretary of State.
Yeah.
He was Secretary of Budget. He's one of these guys, and brilliant but wise. I'll say something that someone said about George one day. He said, he may not be our brightest, but he's our best student. Get that?
Yeah.
Paul Samuelson said that about it. I've never said that publicly.
Right.
Paul, the Nobel laureate, was my teacher too. Paul said that later on when George left to become dean of business at Chicago, then he started a business, took over business, and then he became Secretary of State. I mean, more cabinet officers, Republican. But he once said in testimony at the Iran-Contra hearings, it took place in the late 70s, I think. No, wait a minute.
Reagan was 86, 87, maybe?
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for the date, exactly.
Who was the guy, the famous guy who was the famous guy who was diverting the money?
Oh, no, that wasn't, no, who you mean.
Oliver North.
Yeah. No, George was straight as an arrow.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Integrity, God.
Right.
Wow, I'm crazy about it. I mean, I love the guy. I respect him enormously.
Right.
And he was being questioned, he was Secretary of State, by Senator Anhui from Hawaii during that whole Iran-Contra scandal. And he gave, and I was in London and looking at the testimony, you know, then I was not living there, just there in London on a trip, and there's George Schultz being interviewed on live television, and the Senator Anhui, head of the Foreign Relations Committee of the Senate, said, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you for your candid and direct testimony today. We appreciate that. He really meant that.
Right.
And he's a Democrat talking to a Republican. He said, do you have any parting words of advice for us in the Senate and the American people? You know what George said to me, I'll never forget, was, thank you, Senator Anhui, for that question. Yeah, I guess one thing, be sure never to appoint people who can't live without power. You know, who get that, the subtlety of, is there such a thing, Jason, I'm raising this as a question, as appropriate ambition, because you gotta have that drive and ambition. But at what point, see, George was getting at, beware people can't live without it.
Right.
That's different than somebody wanting it and knowing what you get. How profound that was.
Yeah.
Never give people, I want to get them accurately, please don't appoint people in positions who can't live without it.
Right. They have to want it, but not so much that they're dangerous.
They're dangerous. And you know what? No one's written the book called Appropriate Ambition. Is there such a thing? Because you have to be narcissistic and driven and ambitious and type A women and men, and yet at the same time, you got
to be able to step back from it.
Yeah.
You don't want it to take over who you are.
And George has lived a very happy and long life.
Right. Yeah, it didn't debilitate him.
I'm really curious if there's, I imagine in the decades you've been, covering this, how much have you looked at primate behavior? Because we touched on the social nature a little bit.
It interests me a lot, but I'm not. You see, that's what makes the whole field of leadership so interesting. Because there's a lot we can learn from, especially certain certain chimps, for example, certain kinds of animals that we can from which we can learn, or from whom. I don't know what word to use there, but just as we are now learning more from the brain stuff, that's what. But because I do think there's one tribe in particular that somebody from some anthropologist, a primatologist, you must be interested in that field yourself, all right?
I'm just trying to get to the root of like the history.
There's a certain, there's a certain baboon actually that I'm not remembering the author of the book, but it's specifically around this issue about some very primal aspects of our behavior, which have very much to do with ambition.
Yeah.
That's why that question is so important right now. In fact, all the neurological sciences say we're driven by 4 factors. This is done in what they call, in statistical terms, they've done a meta-analysis of variance, meaning they look at all the studies and done a statistical work on what are the main factors.
Right.
It's more sophisticated than a factor analysis, meta-analysis of variance. It was just coming out when I was a young professor, and it's important. Okay, so they've gone through all the studies of what drives us.
Right.
That's at the level of animals, really.
Right.
And there are 4. And I've memorized them in terms of an ABCD, what's a mnemonic device.
Right.
And in no order, they're all important.
Right.
But I'm new ABCD. But think of them as all A's. A stands for ambition, acquisition, achievement. the drive to achieve. It says very much related to power.
All right.
Second one is bonding, the B.
Affiliation, connection.
Relationships, connection.
Yeah.
C is, could you guess?
C.
C, curiosity.
Curiosity.
Comprehending.
Understanding. Yes.
All that.
Yeah.
D is defense. See, your question earlier about being
Yeah.
enough aware of the
that balance of ambition and
inflection
defense.
points that you can't altogether see that upend you overnight. So you got to be have someone around who's looking at those.
Well, and if you put someone like Steve Jobs against that, you can see he had that massive achievement, massive curiosity.
Yeah.
He was paranoid and defensive about, there could be Microsoft could come get us, Google come get us, whatever. And he really did like to bond with people. It may have been in a weird way sometimes.
In a weird way, yeah.
He may have been too rough on people, but for people he loved deeply.
But his defense was strong. His curiosity was
off the charts.
What time?
We've been talking for an hour and 20 minutes, Warren.
I said it again, please.
We've been talking for 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Oh my God.
We're halfway done.
The reason I looked up, oh my goodness, I have to be home. I'm late
Don't worry.
now. You know what? Because I've had right now at my home in Santa Monica, which is at least a 20-minute drive, is a Buddhist teacher that my wife and I have an hour and a half with every week.
Wow.
It starts at 4. So that's okay. They're starting one, but I should get home.
Yeah, it's time.
Because you know why?
Why?
I'll leave you with a lovely thought that came to my mind just this morning, and I used it in class earlier this year. It's a painting by Goya. I'm not sure exactly. I want to look up the date. It's not important. It was probably. This is important. Spanish painter of great fame.
Yeah.
And one of his famous portraits is of a very old man, roughly my age, with 2 walking sticks, head down, and it shows him kind of plowing ahead, but it's a picture, not a movie.
Right.
And the caption he put to it, Goya put to it, is "I am still learning." And the reason I must go, and I didn't realize, you were very good, Jason, because I haven't paid attention to time.
Neither have I. I just looked up and saw 120 minutes, and they're flashing me all kinds of raps. Listen, we're going to have you back again. This is a great discussion.
I'd love to come back in.
Yeah. I mean, I learned so much. And for everybody.
Did you get enough to have, what do you do? This is 1 hour?
Well, I don't know if we're going to cut it down or not. Our audience loves every minute of it. I guarantee you that. So, hey, everybody, go check out Dr. Warren Bennis's books. There's some on Audible. There's some in your bookstore. The one I've been listening to is On Becoming a Leader, which I think is one of the classics. But still surprised, your memoir is also, I haven't gotten to this one yet.
My first memoir.
Your first memoir, yes. Also a great one, from what I understand, and I'll be getting to that one next. So, wow, thanks for coming on the program and sharing so much great wisdom, continued success, and we'll have you back again soon.
And I'm going to blame you for being
absolutely.
late.
It was absolutely my fault.
I think discipline, showing up on time.
Well, you know what? Curiosity. You said before, you were infinitely curious in talking to you. So.
You picked very good quotes. I better go.
Yeah.
I better run.
Awesome. See you again next time on This Week in
I hope so. Oh, I look forward to